Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at an article from the front page of the Delhi edition. This article deals with Article 356 of the Indian Constitution that provides for the imposition of President's rule in a state. So first let's understand what is Article 356 and how President's rule can be imposed in a state. Let's particularly focus on who has the powers to impose President's rule in a state. See, Article 356 deals with one of the emergency provisions that has been provided in the Indian Constitution. It provides for a state emergency and provides for the imposition of President's rule in any state where there has been a failure of the constitutional machinery. There are two provisions in the Indian Constitution which provides for the imposition of President's rule under Article 356. The first provision is covered under Article 356 itself, and it states that if the President receives a report from the state's governor that the constitutional machinery in the state has broken down, then the President will have the powers to proclaim President's rule in that particular state. This provision also empowers the President to take suo motu notice of the breakdown of constitutional machinery in a state and impose President's rule even without receiving a report from the state's governor. Under this provision, if the President is convinced or satisfied that a situation has arisen in a state where the functioning of the state government cannot be carried out in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, then in such circumstances, the President's rule can be imposed under Article 356. So this makes it very clear that it is the President of India who enjoys the sole power to proclaim President's rule in a state. It can be imposed either on the basis of a report received from the state's governor, or the President can even take suo motu action whenever there is a failure of constitutional machinery in the state. The other provision for imposing President's rule has been provided under Article 365 of the Constitution. Under Article 365, President's rule can be imposed if any state fails to comply with the directions of the orders given by the central government. Even in this scenario, the President can impose President's rule under Article 356 because the failure to comply with the directions of the center amounts to breakdown of constitutional machinery in the state, and hence the situation qualifies as one of the grounds for imposing President's rule under Article 356. But however, this power of the President under Article 356 is not a discretionary power, because as per Article 74, the President is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, and hence the decision to impose President's rule under Article 356 is a power that has been solely vested with the executive. In this case, it is the Union Government or the Union Council of Ministers who provide aid and advice to the President, and it allows the centre to impose President's rule in a state when it determines that there has been a failure of constitutional machinery in the state, either under the provisions of Article 365 or on the basis of a report received by the state's governor or on the basis of suo motu notice taken by the President. So once President's rule has been imposed, the state government would be suspended, that is the State Council of Ministers, and the President can provide for administration in the state, and accordingly, the central government can exercise administrative powers in the state through the office of the governor, who would be assisted by the Chief Secretary of the state and other concerned officers appointed by the President. When President's rule is in place, the state legislature can either be dissolved by the President or it can be kept in suspended animation, and the President can provide for the powers of the state legislature to be exercised by or under the authority of the Parliament. And if the Parliament is not in session, then the President also has the powers to pass ordinances concerning the administration of the state. Then, in order to keep the powers of the executive under check with regard to imposing President's rule, parliamentary approval has been made mandatory by the Constitution. Under Article 356, it has been stated that once proclamation of President's rule has been made by the President based upon the aid and advice of the Union Council of Ministers, this proclamation should be approved in both houses of the Parliament within 2 months of its issue. And for obtaining this approval, a simple majority is sufficient. Once the proclamation of President's rule is approved by both the houses of the Parliament, then it remains in operation for an initial period of 6 months. But however, based on circumstances, President's rule can be extended for a period up to 3 years provided if the Parliament approves the extension once in every 6 months. But however, these checks and balances provided in the Constitution have been found to be insufficient, and many a times the central government has misused the powers to topple state governments, especially the ones that are ruled by opposition parties. To further restrict the powers of the executive and the possible misuse of Article 356, the 44th Amendment was added to the Constitution after the emergency period, and through this amendment, a few constraints were imposed for the extension of President's rule beyond a 1-year period. After this amendment, Article 356 states that President's rule can be extended beyond 1 year in a state only under these two conditions. Either there should be a national emergency that is operating in the country, that is under Article 352, or the Election Commission of India should certify that the continuation of President's rule is necessary in the state because of certain difficulties in conducting the assembly elections on time. But despite all these constraints and checks and balances, in several instances, the central government has misused the provision of President rule in order to topple state governments that are particularly ruled by the opposition parties. To further prevent the misuse of President's rule, even the Supreme Court had stepped in and it placed a set of restrictions through the S.R. Bommai case. But despite all these restrictions, the misuse of Article 356 has continued. But one thing becomes very clear, that under Article 356, it is only the executive which enjoys the powers to impose President's rule. That is, the Union Council of Ministers can provide aid and advice to the President, and it is only the President of India who can proclaim the imposition of President's rule in a particular state where there is deemed to be a failure in the constitutional machinery of the state. But despite these clear-cut provisions of Article 356, the Andhra Pradesh High Court passed an unprecedented ruling on the 1st of October. While looking into a habeas corpus petition, the Andhra Pradesh High Court ordered a judicial inquiry into whether there was a breakdown of constitutional machinery in the state and decide whether the necessary grounds had arisen for the imposition of President's rule in the state. Now, this is clearly an unprecedented and controversial ruling because we just learned that under Article 356, it is only the executive, that is the President, who enjoys the powers to proclaim President's rule, and there is no role for judiciary. So following this unprecedented ruling of the Andhra Pradesh High Court, the state government had approached the Supreme Court, and rightfully, as per the provisions of the Indian Constitution, the Supreme Court has issued a stay order on this judicial inquiry. Because see, the Constitution provides for the doctrine of separation of powers, which provides for a clear separation of the powers enjoyed by the executive and the judiciary. In fact, this doctrine of separation of powers is a part of the basic structure of the Constitution, and by seeking to exercise powers under Article 356, the Andhra Pradesh High Court was clearly engaging in judicial overreach by breaching its boundaries and by stepping into the jurisdiction of the executive. And it has stated that the powers to impose President's rule under Article 356 is solely enjoyed by the executive, and it is only the President who has the powers to determine whether the constitutional machinery in the state has broken down. So clearly, the judiciary has no role under Article 356 and with regard to the proclamation of President's rule. So the Supreme Court has accepted the argument of the state government that this was a case of judicial overreach by the Andhra Pradesh High Court, and it has issued a stay order on the judicial inquiry that was ordered by the High Court. Now let's take up an article from page number 13 that refers to a massive ongoing cyber attack that has been named as the Solarwinds Hack. This is a devastating cyber attack that has been primarily targeted at the United States government and its agencies, and it has also affected several private companies around the world, including in countries such as Belgium, Britain, Canada, Israel, Spain, Mexico, and the UAE. This cyber attack is massive in its scale and impact, and it is a cyber attack that is currently ongoing as we speak. This cyber attack was detected earlier this week by a US-based cybersecurity company known as FireEye, and it had labeled this attack as Campaign UNC 2452. Initial assessments by cybersecurity experts indicates that this is a highly sophisticated attack that has been primarily targeted at the US government and its agencies and departments, and it has also been designed to affect several private companies around the world. So by looking at the scale and the extent of this attack, cybersecurity companies and even the US government have labeled this to be a state-sponsored attack. Because to execute a cyber attack of this scale, the attackers would require a very high level of sophistication and access to enormous resources. Usually they can be possessed only by state agencies or by those attackers and groups who are sponsored by state entities. Cybersecurity experts believe that this attack might have begun somewhere around March 2020 and it continues to infect computers around the world, and as it is an ongoing attack, the exact extent of damage is still unknown, and the US government and the private organizations that have been affected, they are still carrying out the damage assessment. One thing we should note is that in this cyber attack, the attackers have employed a very unique and novel method to target the computers. Cybersecurity experts are referring to this as a supply chain attack because the malware or the malicious software used by the attackers has not directly focused on the target government agencies and private organizations, and instead it has sought to target third-party vendors who supply essential software to these government entities and private organizations. So since the attack has been routed through the products of third-party vendors, experts are referring to it as a supply chain attack. In this attack, an IT management software known as Orion, developed by a US-based company known as Solarwinds, has been targeted, and hence it is being referred to as the Solarwinds Hack. See, the IT company Solarwinds is a key supplier to several US government departments and private companies, and it has provided them this IT management software known as Orion. See, generally, cyber attackers try to exploit the vulnerability either in the hardware or the software in order to gain access to the target system. In this case, the attackers have focused upon the vulnerability in the software update of the Orion IT management software. The attackers have basically sent a fake software update notification to the users of this software, and the users, that is the US government agencies and private organizations who believed this to be a genuine software update, they ended up downloading and installing the updates, and they eventually fell prey to this social engineering technique. So once the fake software update was downloaded and installed, it would unleash a hidden malware which has been named as the sunburst malware, thus making it a Trojan type of attack. See, a Trojan or a Trojan horse is a type of a malware that is often designed as legitimate software. Trojans can be employed by cyber thieves and cyber criminals and even by state cyber warfare agencies in order to gain access to the target systems. The users are usually tricked through a social engineering technique, and they are convinced to download and install a particular program or an executable file, which in turn activates the Trojan and unleashes a malware without the user having any knowledge about this. Once the malware makes its way into the target system, then it immediately starts functioning in the background and provides backdoor access to the attackers. Once the attacker gains backdoor access, he can remotely control the system. They can even steal sensitive data and modify the data on the computers. And interestingly, the sunburst malware, which was loaded onto the Orion software update, has successfully managed to bypass all the firewalls and cybersecurity measures that are put in place. And this novel method and the scale and the extent of the attack clearly indicates the high level of sophistication that is needed to design such cyber attacks. So a few officials of the US government and a few cybersecurity firms are pointing fingers at Russia, and they believe that this is a state-sponsored attack either by Russia's Foreign Intelligence Agency, the SVR, or by its military intelligence, GRU, or by the Russia-based cyber espionage group known as Fancy Bear, which is known to have connections with Russian intelligence agencies. Next, on page number 6, we have an editorial that evaluates the state of relations between India and Bangladesh. See, just a couple of days ago, a virtual summit was held between Prime Minister Modi and Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. During this key summit, Prime Minister Modi has referred to Bangladesh as the key pillar of India's neighborhood first policy. This is an apt description by the Indian Prime Minister because Bangladesh is not only India's largest trading partner in South Asia, but it is also a strategic partner for India with regard to security and geopolitical issues of the region. The Sheikh Hasina government and her party, the Awami League, which came to power in 2009, has been instrumental in addressing India's security concerns, especially with regard to Northeast insurgent outfits. Between the 1960s and early 2000, several Northeast insurgent outfits had found a safe haven in then East Pakistan and later in Bangladesh due to the support extended to them by pro-Pakistan elements and by Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI. But the return of Awami League to power in 2009 and the election of Sheikh Hasina as the Prime Minister of Bangladesh was a turning point for India because her government gave complete support to India to target the Northeast insurgent outfits that had found a safe haven in Bangladesh. And these outfits, such as ULFA, NSCN, NDFB, and all Tripura Tiger Force, they were not only targeted by the Bangladeshi government, but even their top leadership was arrested and extradited and handed over to India. Since then, India-Bangladesh relations have progressed really well, and Bangladesh has been critical to ensuring the security and stability of the northeast of India. From there, the relations have progressed really well, and India-Bangladesh have even resolved the enclave issue by signing the land boundary agreement. So during this recent virtual summit, Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina invited Prime Minister Modi to take part in the 50th anniversary celebrations of Bangladesh's independence next year, in recognition of the critical role that India played in the liberation of Bangladesh war in 1971. The then Indira Gandhi government had extended both overt and covert support to the Bangladesh liberation movement, and the Awami League has always recognized this key role played by India in the liberation of Bangladesh. But however, today the relationship has been plagued by a number of issues, and hence the editorial is asking the Indian government to pay attention to these issues and repair and revamp the relations with Bangladesh, which clearly happens to be one of the most important countries in India's neighborhood. These issues include the continuing violence along the border. See, the India-Bangladesh border happens to be the longest border for India, and several border management challenges exist for India. Because of the long porous nature of the border, organized crime is very prevalent along the India-Bangladesh border, and this includes drug trafficking, arms trafficking, trafficking of wildlife products, pumping of fake Indian currency notes, and other such illicit activities which have inherent connections with terrorism and insurgency. But apart from this, one of the biggest border management challenges for India along the Bangladeshi border is the problem of illegal migration. The large influx of refugees and illegal migrants from East Pakistan and then later from Bangladesh has caused demographic changes in the northeast of India, leading to socio-ethnic tensions in the region. This has even directly contributed to communal polarization and several insurgent movements in the northeast, especially in the states of Assam and Tripura. In 2020 alone, India's border guarding force, the BSF, has killed around 25 Bangladeshis who were trying to cross over the border, and this significant increase in border violence has affected the relationship between India and Bangladesh. Then India's internal policies and laws, such as the NRC and the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act, have also had an impact on the India-Bangladesh relationship. See, in order to end the Assam agitation of the 1970s, the government had promised to update the NRC under the Assam Accord of 1985. Recently, the NRC has been updated under the direct supervision of the Supreme Court, and as a result, in the final NRC list, around 1.9 million people have been excluded from the list. So if India declares all of them as illegal migrants, and if it adopts a policy of deporting them back to Bangladesh, then it is bound to trigger a diplomatic dispute with Bangladesh. In fact, the government of Bangladesh has already opposed the NRC, and it has called it an unnecessary exercise, because Bangladesh is concerned about the possible impact of the NRC on Bangladeshi nationals in India. Next, the Citizenship Amendment Act of India has also been opposed by Bangladesh, and there has already been large-scale protests in Bangladesh against India, because the Citizenship Amendment Act provides for religion-based exclusion, and it also labels Bangladesh as a country where minorities face religious persecution. So these policies and laws of India have already been opposed by Bangladesh, and it has even generated protests against India. Then upon this, we have the Teesta water dispute, which remains unresolved for many years, despite repeated promises being made from the Indian government. Even though the government of India is ready to move ahead with the Teesta water agreement, regional politics in West Bengal and the excessive politicization of the Teesta issue has prevented the government of India from going ahead and signing this water sharing agreement with Bangladesh. So as the India-Bangladesh relationship continues to be affected by these issues and disputes, parallelly, Chinese influence in the country has been growing significantly over the years. Bangladesh has already agreed to take part in China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, or the One Belt, One Road project, and China is already seen to be making massive investments in the infrastructure sector of Bangladesh, and it is also seen to be expanding its economic activities and defense cooperation with the country. So in this context, it's very essential for India to move quickly and repair its relationship with the Bangladeshi government, especially the Awami League, which is in power. And it is also high time for India to understand and acknowledge the internal challenges that are being faced by Sheikh Hasina. Because currently in Bangladesh, we are witnessing a revival of radical Islamist forces who primarily happen to be pro-Pakistan. India has already seen the impact of this between 1975 and 2009, when Bangladesh fell under military rule, and later when the BNP, or the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, came to power. The BNP is largely seen as a pro-Pakistan party which nurtures anti-India sentiments. Then you also have radical factions such as the Jamaat-e-Islami, which are known to harbor several anti-India outfits in Bangladesh. This includes terror outfits such as Huji and the Lashkar, which are sponsored by Pakistan's ISI. And in addition to this, we have a new radical Islamist force in Bangladesh known as Hifazat-e-Islam. So this sudden rise in radicalism and fundamentalism in the country has created a fertile ground for terror outfits such as Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State to promote their ideology, especially through social media. So considering these adverse developments in the neighborhood, and considering how important Bangladesh is for India's security needs in the region, it will have to immediately repair the relationship by addressing all the issues and the disputes that are pending, and it should go on to strengthen and support the Bangladeshi government, that is the Awami League government headed by Sheikh Hasina, as this provides the best possible assurance for protecting India's national interests in Bangladesh. Next, we have an article on page number 1 that provides us an update with regard to the ongoing border tensions between India and China in the Ladakh region. According to this article, both India and China have agreed to hold another round of talks between senior military commanders in order to take forward the process of disengagement. But until the issue is completely resolved, both the sides have agreed to continue with the disengagement process that was agreed between the two foreign ministers and by the two special representatives under the SR mechanism. Next, on page number 6, we have a column that deals with MSP, or minimum support prices. But we have covered this topic repeatedly in the last few weeks, so I would request you to go through this column once. Now let's take up the practice questions for today. Which of the following statements are correct? Inner Line Permit, or ILP, is a travel document that restricts the entry of foreigners to several states in the northeast of India. It draws its origin from the Bengal Eastern Frontier Regulation of 1873. ILP is currently applicable for Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, Nagaland and Manipur. Amongst the given statements, the first statement is incorrect, so the correct answer is option D, 2 and 3 only. See, Inner Line Permit is a mechanism through which travel restrictions have been placed in few select parts of northeast of India. This mechanism traces back its origin to the Bengal Eastern Frontier Regulation of 1873, through which the British were trying to regulate the entry of outsiders into the tribal areas in few parts of northeast of India. The British brought in this travel restriction in order to protect their commercial interests from being exploited by the outsiders. But post-independence, the government of India adopted this policy to restrict the entry of Indian citizens to few select areas in the northeast of India in order to protect the cultural rights and land rights of the tribal communities and the native ethnic groups and the indigenous communities. So if Indian citizens wish to travel to the ILP areas, then they need to procure this travel document, which is issued by the concerned state governments. Until recently, ILP was applicable only in 3 states, that is in parts of Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram and Nagaland. But recently in January 2020, it has been made applicable for Manipur as well. This question has been asked because we have a related article on page number 4. Several pressure groups from Meghalaya have also been demanding the ILP system in order to check the influx of outsiders into the state. Let's look at the next question. Victims of an air crash are required to be compensated by the airline as per which convention? The correct answer is option C, the Montreal Convention. This convention was adopted by the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is a specialized agency of the UN. Please don't confuse the Montreal Convention with the Montreal Protocol that deals with ozone depleting substances. Then I want you to take up an exercise and read about the Stockholm Convention that deals with persistent organic pollutants, read about the Geneva Convention and as well as about the Nagoya Protocol. This question on the Montreal Convention was asked because it has been mentioned in this article on page number 8. Let's look at the next question. Which of the following are reasonable restrictions on the freedom of conscience and free profession, practice and propagation of religion that has been guaranteed under Article 25 of the Indian Constitution? Sovereignty and integrity of India, public order, morality, health. The correct answer is option C, 2, 3 and 4 only. Under Article 25, these are the only 3 reasonable restrictions. It does not include sovereignty and integrity of India. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 10, the Allahabad High Court has held that all individuals have equal right to practice a religion of their choice, and this is a guaranteed fundamental right under Article 25 of the Constitution. Let's look at the next question. Which of the following statements are correct? Right to health has been explicitly recognized as a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. There are multiple references in the Constitution to public health and on the role of the state in the provision of healthcare to citizens. Amongst the given statements, the first statement is incorrect, so option B is the right answer. Even though the Constitution does not expressly guarantee a fundamental right to health, there are multiple references to public healthcare in the Constitution and they can be found in the Directive Principles of State Policy. We have Article 39 Clause E that directs the state to secure the health of the workers. Then we have Article 42 that directs the state to ensure just and humane conditions of work and maternity relief. We also have Article 47 that places a duty on the state to raise the nutrition levels and standard of living of people and to improve public health. Then even under Article 243G, the role of panchayats and municipalities in ensuring public health has been recognized when you read the article along with entry number 23 of the 11th schedule. But however, right to health is indeed a fundamental right even though it has not been explicitly guaranteed by the Constitution, because the Supreme Court in several cases has expanded the definition of Article 21 and it has repeatedly reaffirmed that right to health is a fundamental right which is integral to right to life guaranteed under Article 21. The Supreme Court has held that the government has a constitutional obligation to provide for basic healthcare services, and this makes right to health a fundamental right under Article 21. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 10, the Supreme Court has observed that ordinary people are not able to afford the expensive COVID-19 care, and the failure of the government to make COVID-19 treatment affordable is a violation of the fundamental right to health guaranteed under Article 21 of the Constitution. Let's look at the next question. Why are cities such as Natanz, Fordow, Qom often seen in news? They are UNESCO World Heritage Sites threatened by war and terrorism. They are associated with the nuclear weapons program of Iran. They have achieved their Sustainable Development Goal number 11, which is to develop sustainable cities and communities. They face the highest risk of submergence due to rising sea levels. The correct answer is option B. They are associated with the nuclear weapons program of Iran. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 13, Iran has restarted some of its nuclear facilities located near cities such as Fordow, Natanz and Qom as a direct response to its ongoing tensions with the United States. Let's look at the next question. Which of the following statements are correct? India has proposed the adoption of E20 fuel a blend of 20% ethanol and gasoline. The current permissible level of blending is 10% of ethanol. It will help in reducing vehicular emissions and as well as the country's oil import bill. All the three statements are correct. Option D is the right answer. See, ethanol is basically a biofuel produced by agricultural biomass such as corn, sugarcane, hemp, potato, etc. This biofuel can be blended with gasoline in order to make it more environment friendly and reduce vehicular emissions. And the reduced consumption of fossil fuel will also bring down India's dependency on oil imports, and as a result it will reduce our oil import bill as well. Under the current policy, the permissible levels of blending is 10% ethanol, and India has achieved a blending ratio of 5.6% in 2019. So now the government has proposed the adoption of E20 fuel, which will contain a blend of 20% ethanol with gasoline. Now let's look at a question from the 2019 prelims paper. In the context of which of the following do some scientists suggest the use of cirrus cloud thinning technique and the injection of sulfate aerosol into the stratosphere? See, this question is related to the topic of geo-engineering. Under geo-engineering, the geography of the earth is engineered in order to tackle the impact of climate change and global warming. Under geoengineering, there are two popular techniques. One is climate engineering, where the climate of the earth is engineered to reduce global warming, and the other is to manage solar radiation or solar radiation management in order to bring down global warming and the impact of climate change. One of the proposed techniques under climate engineering is to cause a thinning of the cirrus cloud, because the cirrus cloud is known to absorb and trap the infrared radiation from the Earth's surface. This results in increased global warming, and hence if we manage to thin the cirrus cloud, it reduces the absorption of the infrared radiation and thereby reduces the temperature in the atmosphere. Then one of the techniques under solar radiation management is to spray aerosols in the atmosphere, especially in the stratosphere. And aerosols such as sulfates, they have the ability to reflect a large part of the sunlight and thereby reduce the warming of the atmosphere. So both the techniques referred to in the question, they refer to reduction of global warming, and hence option D is the right answer. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question, under Article 356, the power to impose President's rule has been exclusively vested in the hands of the executive, and this cannot be exercised by the judiciary. Evaluate with suitable examples. The second statement, the Solarwinds Hack is said to be one of the biggest cyber attacks to have targeted the US government agencies and private companies. Examine its scale and impact. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.